Calvary Church is dedicated to doctrine, and we want you to experience the life change that comes from knowing God's Word and applying it to your life. So we explain the Bible verse by verse, every chapter, every book. This is Expound.
Well, last time when we were together, we noticed that David was given quite a promise. He wanted to build a house for the Lord. He had good intentions. He told Nathan the prophet. Nathan said, "Good on you, David. Do all that is in your heart." The Lord told Nathan, "You spoke too soon. Go back and tell David." First of all, he didn't ask for a permanent structure. Number two, give him a promise. And the promise basically consisted of two things: a kid and a kingdom. You're going to have a kid who's going to build me a house. That's Solomon. He'll take your place after you. He will be the one who shall build the house or the temple. But then you'll get a kingdom, and the kingdom will last forever and ever. And so David, when he heard these things, was absolutely overwhelmed. That God would not only make these promises, but speak of a kingdom and speak of his ancestors for days and months and years and generations to come. And he just said, "Lord, I'm blown away." I'm paraphrasing. He didn't say blown away, but that's what I would have said. I am totally blown away. And he concluded the chapter in verse 26 of chapter 17. "And now, Lord, you are God and have promised this goodness to your servant. Now you have been pleased to bless the house," that is the dynasty, the lineage of your servant, "that it may continue before you forever. For you have blessed it, O Lord, and it shall be blessed forever." God promised David an eternal kingdom, a dynasty. Well, there's a problem, isn't there? Because the children of Israel continued to sin, and God ended the dynasty of David with one of his descendants named Jeconiah, Jeremiah chapter 22. A few others were placeholders, but eventually there was a captivity of the people of Judah and eventually all the tribes of Israel into Babylon, where they spent about 70 years, and then they came back. And when they came back, there was no king. There was nobody sitting on the throne of David forever and ever. So that's why when we get to the New Testament, we get the answer to this dangling promise that was left in this chapter. The very first verse of the New Testament says, the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David. That's the first verse of the New Testament, identifying the son of David, tying a promise of a covenant to David, now going through to the New Testament. We get further illumination in Luke's Gospel, chapter 1. When Mary is visited by the angel Gabriel, Gabriel says, "You're going to have a son, you're going to name him Jesus. He will be called the Son of the Highest, and the Lord God will give to him the throne of his father David, and he will rule over the house of Jacob forever." Now we're starting to see what looked like an unfulfilled promise resurrected and a fulfillment promised. Well, we find this throughout the New Testament until we come to the book of Revelation. The very last chapter continues it. I'm just reading to you in chapter 22 of Revelation, where Jesus speaks and says, "I am the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning, the end, the first and the last. I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to you these things in the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David, the bright and morning star. Now, the question I asked last week is, why do some of us, self-included, insist that there must be a millennial kingdom, an earthly kingdom? Why not just go from the present age into the eternal state? Well, some do. Some in their belief of the end times and eschatology do believe that. I'm not one of them. I believe that there will be a 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ upon this very earth, after which time this earth will be destroyed along with the heavens, and God will make a new heaven and a new earth, and that will be the eternal state. Well, people wonder, why is a millennial kingdom necessary? Because without it, you don't have the fulfillment that God promised to David and reiterated through the Psalms and repeated through the prophets and repeated in the New Testament. You have a promise without a fulfillment. The millennial kingdom is phase one of the fulfillment of God's promise to the people of Israel. God promised a kingdom, a twofold kingdom, an eternal kingdom, but also a literal earthly kingdom. We know the second one's going to be fulfilled. We know about heaven and eternity, but phase one of that is to fulfill the promise made to David and the others in the Old Testament. Now, people will say, yeah, but you talk about 1,000 years, and yes, that sounds like a lot to us, but 1,000 years, you're talking about an eternal kingdom forever and ever. 1,000 years is a fraction of forever and ever. You're right, but even though the 1,000 years will be on the earth with Messiah reigning geopolitically from Israel and us ruling and reigning with him, once that is over and he creates the eternal state, new heaven, new earth, new city, it is given the name the new what? Jerusalem. The new Jerusalem. 12 tribes are mentioned, 12 gates, even in that heavenly city that is the size of the moon and comes from heaven toward, but not on, like a satellite around the new earth. It's a wild future we have in store. But even throughout eternity, after phase one, the millennial kingdom on the earth, new heaven, new earth, new capital city, Jerusalem, the new Jerusalem, it is still the fulfillment of the promise made to David. That's why I told you a couple weeks ago, chapter 17 is one of the most important chapters in the Bible, and you will not understand so much of the prophets hereafter and even parts of the New Testament without understanding this covenant that God made to David. So that's chapter 17, and that's why, in brief, we need a millennial kingdom. When we get into chapter 18, which we're doing right now, we are seeing the expansion of David. Now, you're going to see in tonight's study David conquering lots of people. And what we are reading about is the geopolitical expansion westward, northward, and eastward. All in a few verses. He's going to sum it up for us. But he moves westward. You go, westward? Isn't the Mediterranean Sea there? Yes, but west of Jerusalem is the Philistine strongholds. And he will retake that. He will then move to the north and go all the way up into Syria. And then he'll go east across the Jordan River to the Transjordan and occupy some of these ancient lands. So he is taking back land that was lost and taking new lands as well, expanding the kingdom. In a timeline, we're dealing with the 10th century BC. And the 10th century BC in Israel was the golden age of Israeli expansion. They were the hot dog superpower of the day, 10th century BC. and largely due to God's blessing upon David. So chapter 18, verse 1, after this, it came to pass that David attacked the Philistines, subdued them, and took Gath and its towns from the hand of the Philistines. Gath was the headquarters for the Philistines. It was the largest of the 5 Philistine cities. You may remember those cities from previous Wednesday night Bible studies. Gath, Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Ekron. Those were the 5 Philistine stronghold cities. They held sway over for years. David had fled to Gath during the reign of King Saul, was protected by King Achish. Now he's taking it back over and assuming it again under Israeli control. So David attacked the Philistines, took Gath and its towns from the hand of the Philistines. Then he defeated Moab, and the Moabites became servants and brought tribute. There seems to have been a problem with Moab. I'm guessing that at one time, Moab and Israel, they were on speaking terms. They were even friendly toward each other, because David's great-grandmother was a Moabitess. You may remember Ruth. And Elimelech had to leave Bethlehem during a famine and go over and marry, go over to get pasture, and he had a couple sons who died, and you know the story of Ruth. I won't recall or recount it. But there were friendly relationships at the time between Moab and Israel. It seems that over time that relationship soured. They had become enemies, and David wants to strengthen the eastern flank of his empire, remove enemies from that side, and expand his kingdom into Moab. And David defeated Hadadezer, king of Zobah. As far as Hamath, he went to establish power by the Euphrates River. So now he's moving north and east, way east, over into Iraq. So he's dealing with areas, Hamath and these areas are above Damascus. They're way up north in Syria and as far away as the Euphrates River. And I stood on the banks of the Euphrates River once in Iraq, and I marveled that David in his kingdom had made it that far to the east, that at one time that was all under his control, at least as a vassal state where they paid tribute to him. David took, verse 4, from him 1,000 chariots, 7,000 horsemen, 20,000 foot soldiers, and David also hamstrung all the chariot horses, except that he spared enough of them for 100 chariots. So he's recovering what was lost, and he's gaining territory that he never had before, taking back what is lost and gaining new territory. I think that's a good example for us. The Bible has a beautiful promise in the book of Joel that the Lord will restore the years that the canker worm and the consuming worm has destroyed. And when you look at your own life, you might look back to failures where you fell and blew it, and there's repercussions, and you just want to forget it and you want to move on. But it could be that he wants you to visit the old enemy, in a sense, or those that you have hurt in a process of your old life, and go back and make things right and recover old lost territory and get new territory on the way. I had a friend who was a roommate. He was a medical doctor. He was an ER doc. And he taught, before he was saved, he taught evolution back in Philadelphia. He was the science professor. Then he became a medical doctor. He was quite a bright guy. And I had the privilege of leading Dennis to the Lord. And Dennis made it his ambition to go back to all the people from the last several years of his life that he had hurt or offended or misunderstood him or he influenced in the wrong way, and write letters to them explaining how he had come to Christ and how he wants to make things right and restore the relationship. And I saw him as going back and taking territory that was once ceded to the enemy and making new ground at the same time. Well, David did that literally. And then there's a very interesting little footnote in verse 4 that he hamstrung all the chariot horses except that he spared enough of them for 100 chariots. Now, to hamstring a horse is to cut a main tendon so it's crippled. And you say, well, that's just mean. Well, he did it for a reason. These are chariot horses. This would be like a preemptive attack on an enemy. This would be like the equivalent of what Israel did in Iraq back in 1981 when it targeted a nuclear facility and blew it up so that it was disabled from attacking Israel. That was 81. We did it, the United States did it again in 1991, and it looks like Israel needs to do it again, but to a different country this time that are making nuclear weapons, and that is the neighbor of Iraq, and that is the regime in Iran. Looks like they're getting ready to do that. It's like hamstringing their horses, disabling the armaments before the bombs can be sent over. So it wasn't to kill a horse, it was just to make it not able to fight anymore in a battle. And as much as you see this as mean, I see this in part as David being obedient to the Lord, because most kings would say, those are perfectly great horses. I'm going to take them all. But he didn't. He didn't take them because the Torah says that the king of Israel is not to multiply horses to himself, something that Solomon will violate. Not to multiply horses or wives. David took a bunch of wives, but Solomon really did multiply wives. He violated every count of that. So, verse 5, when the Syrians of Damascus came to help Hadadezer, king of Zobah, these northern Syrian enclaves, David killed 22,000 of the Syrians. Then David put garrisons in Syria of Damascus, and the Syrians became David's servants and brought tribute. That is, they paid him. They were subservient to him. They became a vassal state. They had to pay a tariff, a tax. Thus, the Lord preserved David wherever he went. And David took the shields of gold that were on the servants of Hadadezer, brought them to Jerusalem. Also, from Tibhath, from Chun, the cities of Hadadezer, David brought a large amount of bronze with which Solomon made the bronze sea, the pillars, and the articles of bronze. I like this because, yes, God told David, you're not going to build me a house. You are not to be the one to build me a house. But God didn't say anything about the preparations to build the house. So he's not going to build a house, but he's doing an awful lot of front work in gathering silver and gold, tribute, bronze for the implements of the temple itself that his son Solomon will use. So David is doing a solid for Solomon, getting all the preparations. He made the plans, he gets the timbers, he gets the silver, he gets the gold, he gets the bronze. And of course, the sea is the laver, is that huge brass sea with 12 oxen that held it up in the courtyard that Solomon will build in this temple. You know, you might have a dream, and God might say no to your dream. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, I think, on a Sunday. But he might fulfill your dream through somebody else. If you see that happening, and you could go, oh, that's my dream. Help that person. You are fulfilling your dream, but through another person. You know, when I first moved to Albuquerque, I moved here because I was antsy. I wanted to go do something. I wanted to leave California and go do something. And somebody said Albuquerque. I didn't know what an Albuquerque was. I said, sure, I'll go there. I want to start churches. So I came here. Well, then after a couple years, I was asked to do a little, get a Bible study started in Denver. So I'd fly up on a Sunday night. We had a couple hundred people in a hotel. And I came home to Lenny. I said, I think we're supposed to move to Denver. And this happened so frequently, the joke in my house was, wherever Skip visits is the place he's going to move next. And it drove her nuts and made her unstable. And the Lord spoke to me and said, you might have the dream or the vision, now find others who can fulfill that dream and vision. So instead of moving to 20 different places, I just found 20 different men to raise up and send them out to those places. Now there's technology, and we were just in Dallas Sunday night with about 75 or 80 people who are interested in the campus there. We were in Phoenix a couple weeks before that, about the same amount interested in a campus there. So if you are having a dream, God has put it on your heart, but you're seeing somebody else, maybe get behind that person and don't discourage them, but encourage them. There was, in 1956, a Canadian hockey player. He was a goalie. And he was in the Olympics, and his heart's desire was to bring home the gold for Canada, especially hockey, right? Come on, that's their sport. So he was unable to do that. He did bring home the bronze medal for the Olympic team. But he had a son. And his son, in 2002, brought home the gold for Canada. And it was largely because his dad got behind him and fulfilled the dream that he had through his boy. So you might have a dream. God might want to fulfill it in you, through you, or to somebody else. If you see it in somebody else, don't get mad, don't pout. Smile, encourage them, help them, prepare them. Get them the silver, the gold, the bronze, the timbers. And then verse 9, when Tau, also called Toi in the book of Samuel, the king of Hamath, that's way up north past Damascus, heard that David had defeated all the army of Hadadezer of Zobah, he sent Hadoram, his son, to King David to greet him, bless him, because he had fought against Hadadezer and defeated him, for Hadadezer had been at war with Tau. So, hey, I love you, you're fighting my enemy, and you won, and I've been fighting him for a long time, so good on you, David. And Hadadoram brought with him all kinds of articles of gold, silver, and bronze. Cha-ching! More money in the till for the temple, for Solomon. King David also dedicated these to the Lord, along with the silver and the gold that he had brought from all these nations, from Edom, from Moab, from the people of Ammon, from the Philistines, and from Amalek. Moreover, Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, killed 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. He also put garrisons in Edom, and all the Edomites became David's servants. And the Lord preserved David wherever he went. A note about Zeruiah, don't pass over that name, that's David's sister. And Zeruiah has a few sons, and they're the nephews of David. Joab is another one, but Abishai is one of David's most important men over his fighting force. So it is David's nephew of Abishai, the sister or perhaps the half-sister of David. So David reigned over all Israel and administered judgment and justice to all his people. So once again, David is collecting all of the materials for the building project that he will never himself see fulfilled. But he's doing what he can do. And let me just say, if you look at your life and take an evaluation of who you are and what your gifts are, you might be prone to say, well, I can't do this and I can't do that. And we often focus on what we can't do. Don't do that. Focus on what you can do. You do have gifts. You do have a calling. Find out what those gifts and that calling is, and don't focus on what you are unable to do, but focus on what you can do. And that's what David did. So let's say you want to be a missionary. You've always wanted to be a missionary, but something is prohibiting you from being a missionary. I had a guy come to me in my office saying, I'm called to the Philippines. I've just been passionate about it for years now. And I'm getting more excited as the days go on. He was just telling me about this, and I said, great, I think it's awesome. Now tell me about your wife, because he said he was married. Is she excited? Dead silence. Well, she really doesn't want to go, but I can convince her. Maybe you can convince her. I said, you know what? It could be that you're not called to the Philippines as a missionary. And I could see his face fell. He was forlorn. I said, but God can use you to raise money to send someone to the Philippines. You can do that. And it could be that your wife will want to do that later, but in the meantime, you have a good job, you have a good business. Use your finances to do what you can do and let others do what they can do, because you can't do this right now. Or maybe your heart is set on having children, but you've never been able to conceive as a woman or as a father and mother, parents. But you could become the best uncle or the best hero or the best mentor or the best foster parent. You could do certain things. Or giving so much to OCC to bless them, those kids overseas, once a year to share the gospel. So don't focus on what you can't do, focus on what you can. So David reigned over all Israel, administered judgment and justice to all the people. So his reign was successful. He's doing God's will. So far, so good. Joab, the son of Zeruiah, the second son, was over the army. Jehoshaphat, not King Jehoshaphat, different guy, was the son of Ahilud, was the recorder. Zadok, the son of Ahitub, and Abimelech, the son of Abiathar, were the priests. Shavshah was the scribe. Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was over the Kerethites and the Pelethites. So we're getting a couple of cabinet members in David's entourage of leadership. The Pelethites and the Kerethites were mercenary, non-Israelite mercenary armies, very, very common practice to hire mercenary armies to fight on your behalf when you had a formidable enemy to fight against. So you would hire it out. This is common practice throughout the Old Testament. And so Benaiah was the head over these mercenary armies, these two groups. And David's sons were chief ministers or royal advisors at the king's side. Now it happened after this that Nahash, the king of the people of Ammon, died, and his son reigned in his place. Then David said, I will show kindness to Hanun, the son of Nahash, because his father showed kindness to me. So David sent messengers to comfort him concerning his father, and the servants of David came to Hanun in the land of the people of Ammon to comfort him. Okay, first of all, Ammon. Ammon is present-day Jordan. And there's even the capital city of Jordan today is very similar to this ancient word Ammon. It's Amman. Amman, Jordan, is the capital of modern Jordan. In ancient times, Amman was called Rabbah. You'll see it mentioned here in the text. But the Ammonites are on the eastern side of the Jordan River in modern-day Jordan. Now notice the name Nahash, the king of the people of Ammon, he died. Now I'm going to jog your memory. As soon as Saul became king, king number one, Saul, way before David, when Saul became king, Nahash, the king of the Ammonites, attacked a northern eastern city in Israel called Jabesh Gilead. And the people of Jabesh Gilead were ready to surrender. They knew that there was no organized army under Saul. He had just become king. Here now they have a neighbor king who wants to take them over and annihilate them, so they surrender. And the people of Jabesh Gilead say, "Make a covenant with us and we will serve you." And listen to what Nahash said. Nahash said, "Okay, I'll make a covenant with you under one condition, that I get to put out, take out, gouge out every man's right eye. I'm going to debilitate you, just like hamstringing the horses. You're not going to start a coup against me. I'm going to take all your men and gouge out their right eye." That's the condition of the covenant. If you do that, we'll make peace. If you don't do that, you're dead. Well, that's a hard deal, isn't it? So the people of Jabesh Gilead said, "Give us a week to think about it. Give us 7 days." And they took those 7 days and sent a message down to Saul. Saul took an ox and cut it up into pieces, sent it to all the tribes of Israel and said, "May this happen to all your oxen if you don't come and help us fight against the Ammonites." So he mustered an army of like 300,000 men. And they defended Jabesh Gilead and attacked and killed a large portion of the army of the Ammonites. Now that's 50 years ago that this happened. Evidently, as time went on, Nahash was friendly with David and treated David with respect, perhaps gave him asylum in the land. But he dies. And David, again, just tender-hearted, kind-hearted, good intentions. I'm going to send him a gift. I'm going to encourage him. His dad died. I'm going to go show kindness to him. So he wants to make sure that he has an ally over on the east. So he sends servants. But look at verse 3. "And the princes of the people of Ammon said to Hanun, 'Do you think that David really honors your father because he has sent comforters to you?'" These are a group of conspiracy theorists in the camp of the Ammonites. "Did his servants not come to you to search and to overthrow and spy out the land?" Therefore Hanun took David's servants, shaved them, cut off their garments in the middle at their buttocks. I just find it interesting that that's in the Bible. And sent them away. Oh, the sin of suspicion. Here's a guy who wants to do something good, and that overture is misunderstood by a group of young, no doubt, counselors who are feeding things into the ear of this new leader. Probably they're remembering their history. Remember what happened 50 years ago with Saul? And they can't get over that, so they want to probably seek revenge for that. So Hanun did what we just read in verse 4, shaved off their beard. Now that is a disgrace, especially to an ancient Israelite man. The beard is a symbol of manhood. I'm looking at some of your beards. Some of you guys, I have beard envy. You're just some good-looking beard. My son has a good-looking beard. There's a good-looking beard right there. Well, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, your beard was evidence of that you were a man. To cut that off was a disgrace. In fact, Kyle and Delitzsch said that it was the greatest insult because the beard was the greatest ornament for a man. You might even remember Psalm 133. Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. It's like the dew that comes on Mount Hermon. It's like the oil that runs down the beard of Aaron. So they shaved the beard, and to humiliate them, cut it down with their rear end showing. Now this was common practice for slaves, for captives. When we get to the book of Isaiah, around chapter 20, and they talk about the Assyrians coming in, they shave their beards and they cut their garments off midway, just like this, and lead them off into captivity. So it was treating them like a slave. Also, it was an insult for a Jewish man because the robe of a Jewish man at the very bottom had tassels. And the tassels were reminiscent of the commandments of God in the Old Testament. So it's a very anti-Semitic as well as humiliating kind of an overture to do. Then, verse 5, some went and told David about the men, and he sent to meet them. Notice the king comes out to meet them. Because the men were greatly ashamed, and the king said, wait at Jericho until your beards have grown, and then return. When the people of Ammon saw that they had made themselves repulsive to David, Hanun and the people of Ammon sent 1,000 talents of silver to hire for themselves chariots and horsemen from Mesopotamia, from Syria, Ma'akah, and from Zobah. It was an uh-oh moment for them. They did what they did, and then it's like, uh-oh. Now, if they wouldn't have done this, they would have saved themselves a battle, and they would have saved themselves a lot of cash. Notice that they had to pay 1,000 talents of silver. That's the equivalent of over $35 million in present currency, about $37.5 million to pay for these armies to come down and rescue them. So if they would have just let the overture be the overture of kindness instead of this, but no, now they realize, we just, this is a declaration of war, what we just did. So they hired for themselves 32,000 chariots with the king of Ma'akah and his people who came and encamped before Medeba. Also the people of Ammon gathered together from their cities and they came to battle. When David heard of it, he sent Joab and all the army of the mighty men. Oh, where would David be without his mighty men? And I love that they're called the mighty men. David's mighty men began, I told you of this, I remind you again, back in 1 Samuel chapter 22. David was hiding in a cave, the cave of Adullam in the wilderness. And we are told that people came to David while he was out there hiding from Saul. They were disgruntled with Saul. They didn't like his governance. They didn't like his government. They didn't like his policy. So it says, everyone who was in debt, shows you what kind of a king he was. Everyone who was in debt, everyone who was discontented, they all gathered to David, and there were 400 mighty men of David that grew to thousands, and then more thousands, and then armies, and then he is eventually crowned king of Hebron, and then king of Israel. So he has a whole group of mighty men. Then the people of Ammon came out and put themselves in battle array before the gate of the city. And the kings who had come were by themselves in the field. So they had two companies in this battle. The Ammonites are naturally going to guard their own capital city of Rabbah. They're going to be by their own gates. Their families are there. Their livelihoods are there. They're not going to go out in the field. But the armies, they just spent $37.5 million in being mercenaries for them, put them out in the field to get whoever's coming in from Israel and try to defeat them before they get to town. When Joab, verse 10, saw that the battle line was set against him, before and behind. There's two different flanks. He chose some of the choice men of Israel and put them in battle array against the Syrians. The rest he put under the command of Abishai, his brother. And they set themselves in battle array against the people of Ammon. Then he said, if the Syrians are too strong for me, then you shall help me. But if the people of Ammon are too strong for you, then I will help you. So a tag team in the military. We'll both fight. If I see that you're losing, I'll come to your help. If you see that I'm losing, you come over and send your guys and help me. Verse 13, one of my favorite sections here. Be of good courage, and let us be strong for our people and for the cities of our God. And may the Lord do what is good in his sight. That's just good advice. And it tells me that courage is a choice. Bravery is a choice, not a feeling. You're facing battle. You're facing a war. Be of good courage. Be courageous for your people. Be courageous for the land. Make that choice. So it's good advice. It's also good theology because it shows the relationship between the sovereignty of God and the responsibility of man. God is sovereign. May the Lord do what the Lord wants to do. That's his sovereignty. We're going to fight. We're going to engage. That's human responsibility. We're going to leave the results to God. That's divine sovereignty. I encourage you to do both in this upcoming election. Be engaged, vote, fight in a good way. I don't mean like go out and beat somebody up. And then leave the results to God. Do what you can, get the word out, get people motivated, vote yourself. Don't be Alan apathetic, or I should say Abel apathetic, but be engaged, but then leave the results to the sovereignty of God. So God ordains the end, but he ordains the means toward the end. He ordains the end. We're going to fight this battle, but the means toward the end is us getting involved and getting strong and being courageous. And that's an important principle. God ordains the sovereign end of things, but he ordains the means to the end. So, for instance, salvation. I've told you the story before about two of my favorite people in history who were at odds with each other. One was Dr. Billy Graham, and one was D. Martin Lloyd-Jones in London, England, who was a pastor of a church. When Billy Graham was doing a crusade over in London, and I got this from Billy Graham himself, he told me the story. When he was over in London, he wanted to get as many churches involved in bringing people to the crusade as possible. He met Martin Lloyd-Jones, one of my heroes of the faith. And he said, would you and your church get involved in our crusade? And Lloyd-Jones said, yes, I will, under one condition, and that is that you do not call people forward publicly in an altar call. Well, he was a strict Reformed theologian. He did not believe in that kind of evangelism. And Billy Graham said, I can't do it. And when Billy told me that, I just thought, I'm disappointed in Lloyd-Jones. And if I would have been there, and there'd be no reason because I was a peepsqueak, but I would have said to him, Dr. Jones, God ordains the end of everyone's salvation. But can't you see that he also ordains the means to that salvation? And this is quite possible the means of many people in London's salvation. That is the preaching of Dr. Billy Graham and him calling them forward. So yes, God can do what he wants, but allow the means to take place toward the end that you are praying for. But never happened. Be of good courage. Be strong for our people, for the cities of our God, and may the Lord do what is good in his sight. So Joab and the people who were with him drew near for the battle against the Syrians, and they fled before him. And when the people of Ammon saw that the Syrians were fleeing, they also fled before Abishai, his brother, and entered the city. So Joab went to Jerusalem. Now, do you realize that what you are reading is a fulfillment of a promise that God made to his people? Way back when he first gave the law through Moses, and the people of Israel were just becoming God's people, their own group, God made this promise in Deuteronomy 28. He said this, "Now it shall come to pass, if you diligently obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe carefully all the commandments which I command you today, that the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations of the earth. And all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you, because you obey the voice of the Lord your God. Blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the country. The Lord will cause your enemies who rise against you to be defeated before your face. They shall come out against you one way and flee before you 7 ways. The Lord will command the blessing on you in your storehouses, and in all to which you set your hand, he will bless you in the land which the Lord your God is giving you." So, what God promised in Deuteronomy 28, we're seeing happen here in 1 Chronicles chapter 19. The people in the fields are fleeing. The people in Rabbah, the Ammonite capital, they're fleeing. Verse 16, when the Syrians saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they sent messengers and brought the Syrians who were beyond the river and Shopach. Sounds like a wrestler. The commander of Hadadezer's army went before them. It was told David he gathered all Israel, crossed the Jordan, came upon them, set up in battle array against them. So when David had set up in battle array against the Syrians, they fought with him. Then the Syrians fled before Israel. David killed 7,000 charioteers, 40,000 foot soldiers of the Syrians, and killed Shopach the wrestler, the commander of the army. And when the servants of Hadadezer saw that they were defeated by Israel, they made peace with David. Peace through strength that's what this doctrine is called. It happens to be true. You want to make peace? Be strong. Have a show of force. And the enemies will fear that, respect that, and make peace. They made peace with David, became his servants, so the Syrians were not willing to help the people of Ammon anymore. Let me just close this chapter by saying, beware of having a suspicious heart. All of this mess was created by somebody going, they're not really here to bless you, they're here to spy on you. You never know. So this whole conspiracy thing concocted wasn't true. It was fake news. And just beware of a suspicious heart. They don't misunderstand me, they're out to get me. Give them the benefit of the doubt. You'll save yourself a heap of problems. Now, something else to consider as we close this out, did you notice that the people who were humiliated had their beard shaved and their garments cut? Their king went out to meet them. The king came, and his coming encouraged them. Said, boys, your beards will grow back. Here's some new garments. Our king is coming for us. We're in a battle right now, but our king is coming. Jesus is coming with robes of righteousness that he will adorn us with for eternity. Let that encourage you. Don't walk around suspiciously humiliated. Just the king's coming. Be encouraged. And we have time for, look at that, a short chapter, no problem. Chapter 20. And it happened in the spring of the year. I love springtime in Jerusalem. Nothing quite like it. But I digress. It happened in the spring of the year. At the time kings go out to battle, that Joab led out the armed forces and ravaged the country of the people of Ammon, came and besieged Rabbah, that's present-day Ammon, Jordan, the capital of then the kingdom of the Ammonites. But David stayed at Jerusalem, and Joab defeated Rabbah and overthrew it. It's the springtime of the year. It's fighting season. It's when the kings go out to war. Well, it's springtime. It's warming up. I think it's time to get my sword out, my shield out, my chariot ready. Time to go kill me some enemies. That might sound like an odd phrase, the times when kings or people go to battle, but the winter you don't want to fight in because that's when it rains in that part of the world. And so everything's muddy. They had no paved roads. All the roads are muddy. Chariot wheels get stuck. So springtime, it dries out. The roads are hard. It's good. If you're going to fight, that's the time to do it. You don't want to do it in the middle of the summer. It's really, really hot. So it's springtime. It's sort of the time that kings go looking to expand their territories. However, there's something that is happening here that we are not told about by the chronicler, but we are told about in 1 Samuel chapter 11, which is a parallel account. It says, it was the springtime of the year when the kings go out to war. David stayed in Jerusalem and walked out one night on his balcony, and he saw a woman bathing. I don't know if David was getting older or David was getting cocky, but kings go to battle. This time he goes, I'm going to sit this one out. Fighting is a young man's game. I'm king now. I don't have to go out to every battle. I'm just going to stay home, take it easy. If David would have been in the battle, he wouldn't have been in bed with Bathsheba. And he just took it easy. It's okay to take it easy. It's okay to have leisure time. But I have noticed that Satan so often attacks me at leisure moments. When my guard is down, I'm not fighting. I'm not in a battle. I'm at peace. I'm idle. I get bored. So the chronicler leaves that out. He's talking about the expansion of David, so it didn't fit his chronology. But that's when David fell with Bathsheba and then killed her husband Uriah the Hittite. David took their king's crown, verse 2, from his head and found it to weigh a talent of gold, and there were precious stones in it. And it was set on David's head, and he brought out the spoil of the city in great abundance. This tells me that David was not a lightweight. He had to have a strong neck. He wasn't a pencil neck. Why do you say that, Skip? Because a talent of gold is 75 pounds. Now, a little perspective check. When the Queen was on the throne in England, her crown at inauguration was 3.5 pounds. King Charles' crown was like 4.5, maybe close to 5 pounds. 75 pounds. I'm sure it was just on there, not like all day long, unless he wanted to work out and get like Shrek neck. But probably just as an ornamental gesture from time to time, this 75-pound hat was put on David. He brought the spoil into the city in great abundance. He brought out the people who were in it, put them to work with saws, with iron picks, with axes. So David did to all the cities of the people of Ammon. He let them live, and he used them as his workforce. David and all the people returned to Jerusalem. Now what happened afterward, that war broke out at Gezer. That's where all the old guys live. The old geezers like me, we live up there. It happened afterward that war broke out at Gezer with the Philistines, at which time Sibbecai the Hushathite killed Zippai, who was one of the sons of the giant being Goliath, and they were subdued. And there was war with the Philistines, and Elhanan, the son of Jair, killed Lahmi, the brother of Goliath the Gittite. the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. Yet again there was war at Gath, where there was a man of great stature with 24 fingers and toes. That's 24 digits in total. And then you'll notice how they're divided, 6 on each foot. And he also was born to the giant. This is not medically unusual. It's not normal, but it's not seen. It is possible to have a high level of growth hormone that affects the pituitary gland, and or a tumor in the pituitary, and you can get all sorts of things like pediatric, like big jointed children and many digited kids. Usually they're surgically removed these days, but the idea of a giant is not unheard of. Back in 1918 in Alton, Illinois, and I remember this because I drove through Alton this past summer, but there was a guy in 1918 called Robert Ludlow. He was born with giantism. He was born at 8 pounds 5 ounces. When he died, he was 9 feet 11 inches tall. He died relatively young because of his condition, but just enormous. You can look it up, and don't do it now, and see pictures of this guy. And when he died, his casket was so large, I don't know, it took like 12 or 20 guys to carry his enormous casket. But we're reading about how David and David's relatives killed the rest of the giants, somehow related to the Philistine giant Goliath. Now, giants, we read about them in the Old Testament. We read about, for example, the Anakim or the Nephilim in the book of Genesis chapter 6. The Anakim were the ones in the book of Numbers, I think chapter 12, when they sent spies to spy out the land, and they noticed that there were the sons of Anak there, giants, big, mean guys, and it caused fear in the tribes of Israel. And then when Joshua took over the land, all of the Anakim were disposed of or put out of the land, except for a few that made it down to Gaza and Gath, the area of these Philistine strongholds. Well, now we find out how they survived from that area, from the time of settling the land under Joshua, and now how they are defeated. So giants are not unusual. As I said, you could have high levels of growth hormones that cause this polydactyly or mega joints, etc. Verse 6, there was again war at Gath. I already read that. 24 digits. So, when he defied Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shimea, David's brother, killed him. These were born to the giant in Gath, and they fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. So the giants are gone. Something about fighting giants. We even sing about that. And when we talk about, we even did a series on defeating giants, giant of fear, etc., etc. The thing about a giant is they're hard to miss. And I mean that on two levels. First of all, they're apparent, they're big in your life. They're always there. They loom wherever you go day by day. You know what they are in your own existence. But because they're so large, they're also easy to hit. So David goes to the battlefield, and yes, all he has is a sling with a stone. He's a little guy, but here's Goliath, and there's so much mass on this guy, he's an easy target. Here's David, who has been able to get a rabbit and a lion and a wolf with a single stone, and the head of Goliath must have been like enormous. I can hit that. So just keep that in mind. Giants seem and are enormous. But remember what David said when he saw Goliath? He said, you come to me with a sword and a shield and a spear. I come to you in the name of the Lord God of hosts, whose armies you have defied. I have what you don't have. Yes, you have armaments. I have youth, agility, speed, but more than that, I have a covenant with God. I come to you in the name of the God of Israel, whom you have defied. And that is always, if you're going to defeat giants, you need a healthy respect for the living God who's on your side. And you can defeat giants, by the way. You can defeat that giant of fear, that giant of addiction. You can, that giant of discouragement. But have a healthy respect for how big your God is, because here's David coming against Goliath. Everybody's thinking, oh, that poor young David. David looks at Goliath and says, this poor, big old, slow-moving giant. He's outnumbered. You go, outnumbered? Yes. Remember, Martin Luther said, with God, one is a majority. David walked into the battle knowing he had the victory because he had a healthy respect for how big God is. So whatever you're facing that is big, I get it. It's big. The diagnosis is big. The problem, the debt, huge. How big is your God? How big is your God? Big enough to handle that. There was a dear lady whose prayer request was on the screen tonight. It was a Della? I think it was Deli. And praying for her, she had cancer. And my prayer for her is that she would see cancer as the small c, Christ as the big C. Christ is bigger than that cancer. And I say that because my wife had one of the very worst forms of abdominal cancer. And the doctor said, this is the kind of cancer that usually kills people, comes back, and it's up there with the worst of the worst. And we thought, this could be it. But I remember she always said that. Cancer, Skip, is just the small c. We serve Christ, the big C. So I'm thankful he defeated that giant. Thank you, Father, for time in your word, time together to break the bread of truth with your people. Strengthen us with these stories, these ancient stories that are still relevant, and teach us. And thank you, Lord, that when others would want to humiliate us, that the King comes to us, clothing us with robes of righteousness, with kindness and mercy and grace. In Jesus' name, amen.
For more resources from Calvary Church and Skip Heitzig, visit calvarynm.church. Thank you for joining us from this teaching in our series, Expound.